All right, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about one of history's most important and honestly, most overlooked civilizations, the Phoenicians. Now, they built a different kind of empire, one of ideas and trade, not of land, and you're going to see their impact is still with us in ways you probably never expected.
So just look at this for a second. A, B, C. These are the absolute basic building blocks of our world, right? We use them every single day without a second thought, in our texts, our emails, everything. But have you ever just stopped and wondered, where did this incredible invention actually come from? And believe me, the answer isn't just some dusty old history lesson. It takes us on this amazing journey 3,000 years back in time and straight to a group of master sailors and innovators who literally changed the world.
So yeah, our story really kicks off with the alphabet. This is the thread we're going to pull on, and it's going to lead us right to a group of people who, for all their influence, have kind of been called a lost civilization.
And here they are, the Phoenicians. These were an ancient people living right on the coast of the Mediterranean in what we now call Lebanon. And their most famous, most lasting creation? Well, you're using it right now just by reading this slide.
Okay, so this is where it gets really cool. Look at how this one idea traveled. Around 1050 BC, the Phoenicians developed this totally revolutionary system. It only had 22 letters, all consonants, which made it super simple, elegant, and way easier to learn than other scripts at the time. As they sailed around trading, they basically took it viral across the Mediterranean. The Greeks picked it up, they added vowels, and boom, that evolved into the Latin alphabet that so many of us use today. The key takeaway? Every single time you write something down, you are using a piece of Phoenician technology.
So who were these absolute geniuses? Well, that's where the mystery actually gets a little deeper. Turns out, the story of who they were is just as interesting as the story of their alphabet.
Which brings us to a huge question, right? If they gave us something as basic as our ABCs, why do they feel so invisible? A big part of the reason is that most of their own records, their own history written by them, just hasn't survived. We mostly know about them from what other people wrote.
In fact, even the name we use for them, Phoenician, came from somebody else. It's from the Greek word phonix, which was all about this super expensive purple dye they were famous for. That wasn't what they called themselves, though. They would have said they were Canaanites, or more likely, they'd just identify with their hometown. Like, I'm from Sidon, or I'm from Tyre.
And this is a really important thing to get about them. Phoenicia wasn't one big unified empire. It was more like a collection of powerful, independent city-states. You had Byblos, Sidon, and the real powerhouse, Tyre. And honestly, they were often rivals, competing with each other, but they were all tied together by their culture and, of course, their total mastery of the sea.
And oh man, that mastery of the sea, it defined everything about them. They weren't conquerors in the usual sense. Their empire wasn't land. It was a massive network of trade routes and ports that stretched across the entire Mediterranean.
This really gives you a sense of their business genius. I mean, they were the ultimate middlemen of the ancient world. They'd ship those famous cedars of Lebanon down to Egypt. They figured out how to mass-produce glassware, and get this, they basically spread the culture of winemaking everywhere they went. They traded in luxury textiles, and they sailed all the way to modern-day Spain to get silver. They were everywhere.
And the effect of all this was just massive. They weren't just moving stuff around, they were moving ideas, new technologies, different cultures. You could say they were the ones who first wired the Mediterranean, creating this humming, interconnected economic zone. They really set the stage for the Greeks and Romans who came after.
Okay, now look at this date, 814 BC. It might look random, but trust me, this is a huge moment, not just for the Phoenicians, but for world history. It really marks the high point of their expansion and their power.
Because in 814 BC, a group of colonists from that powerhouse city of Tyre founded a new city in North Africa. They called it the New City. We know it as Carthage. And this little colony would grow up to become a massive superpower itself, an empire so strong it would eventually go toe-to-toe with Rome in some of the most famous wars in all of history. Okay, so we've seen their incredible network, but what was the tech that made it all possible? Let's zoom in on two of their most famous innovations, that legendary purple dye and their absolutely revolutionary ships.
So this is the stuff that gave them their Greek name, Tyrian purple. It was this stunningly vibrant purple dye that they got by milking thousands and thousands of tiny little sea snails. The whole process was incredibly difficult, and apparently it smelled awful. But the cloth they made was literally worth more than its weight in gold. It became the ultimate status symbol, the color of royalty for centuries.
And their reputation for making high-quality stuff was legendary. And that's not just me saying it. Even ancient writers like Homer in the Iliad raved about their work. When he needed to describe a super valuable, top-of-the-line object, he called it a masterpiece of Sidonian craftsmanship. That tells you everything you need to know about their brand recognition. But you know, as impressive as all their crafts were, none of it, the trade, the colonies, none of it would have happened without their single greatest piece of technology, their ships.
So what was their secret? It was this brilliant technique, mortise and tenon joinery. Instead of just nailing planks together, they would carve these perfect little slots, mortises, into the edge of one plank and then fit a little wooden peg, a tenon, from the next plank right into it. This locked the whole hull together, making their ships unbelievably strong and watertight. It meant they could build bigger ships, carry more cargo, and sail farther than anyone else. It was a total game changer.
So what happened to them? Where did they go? Well, like a lot of ancient peoples, their story doesn't really end with a giant explosion. It's more of a slow fade. But their legacy is definitely not lost.
Over hundreds of years, the Phoenician cities fell to bigger and bigger empires. The Assyrians, the Persians, and eventually Alexander the Great and the Greeks. So yeah, their political independence slowly disappeared. But it was almost too late for them to vanish, because their cultural and technological DNA had already been copied and pasted all across the ancient world. And this is really the bottom line, isn't it? This is what we inherited. The letters you're reading this very second, the shipbuilding that ruled the seas for 1,000 years, the very idea of a connected global economy, and hey, even the spread of wine culture across Europe. Their fingerprints are everywhere, hiding in plain sight.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought. The Phoenicians really show us that power isn't always about how much land you conquer. They built a network, not a traditional empire, and it really makes you stop and think. In our own crazy, hyper-connected world today, how much of it is still resting on a foundation built by these ancient masters of the sea?